Dennis Rader was a respected community member in Park City, Kansas. A husband, father, Boy Scout leader, and even the president of his church council. Rader was the image of normalcy. He worked as a compliance officer, enforcing rules around his quiet suburban town. But no one knew that this seemingly ordinary man had a terrifying alter ego. Dennis Rader, a church council president and Boy Scout unit leader in Kansas, pretended to be a model family man to his neighbors for 30 years when he was actually the BTK Killer. Dennis Rader was not only the president of his church community, but also a devoted partner and a loving parent, admired and cherished by those who thought they knew him best, making his hidden dark side all the more shocking and heartbreaking. To everyone who knew him, he appeared to be an honorable and upstanding man, but he was living twisted lives. Rader had been living a double life as the Park City, Kansas serial killer, also referred to as the BTK Killer, who killed and tortured 10 victims in and around Wichita, Kansas, between 1974 and 1991. Not even Rader's wife, Paula Dietz, was aware of this. When the BTK Killer, which stands for bind, torture, kill, was ultimately apprehended in 2005, Dennis Rader's wife and his daughter Carrie even refused to accept it. "I learned my morals from my dad," his daughter would later said. "He gave me moral guidance." Hello viewers, in this video, I will tell you the grisly story of Dennis Rader, the man no one suspected was the BTK Killer. Her father preyed on girls who looked like her for 30 years, but she was unaware of this. This is the terrifying tale of the BTK murderer. Before Dennis Rader became the BTK Killer, on March 9, 1945, Dennis Lynn Rader, the eldest of 4 siblings, was born in Pittsburgh, Kansas. He was raised in a quite modest house in Wichita, the same city he would later attack. Rader had a violent streak in him, even as a teenager. As he later revealed in a 2005 interview, "When I was in grade school, I actually had some problems." He allegedly would hang and torture stray animals. Fantasies that are sexually suggestive, most likely more than usual. It's likely that every man experiences some form of sexual fantasy. In simple terms, I was probably a little stranger than other people. Dennis Rader continued by describing how he would use rope to bind his hands and ankles. Furthermore, he would cover his head with a bag, a method he would later utilize on his victims. He took pictures of attractive women from magazines, cut them out, and wrote jokes and ropes on them. He stated how he could restrain and control them, which he then would during his crimes as the BTK Killer. However, Rader kept maintained a normal appearance, going to college short before leaving to join in the U.S. Air Force. After serving his time, he settled down in Wichita to work as an electrician. He then met his wife Paula Dietz. Through church, he asked her to marry him after just a few dates. She worked as a bookkeeper for Snacks convenience store. They wed in 1971. The BTK Killer's first murder. Dennis Rader killed his first victim on January 15, 1974, not long after losing his work as an electrician in 1973. Dennis Rader attacked into the Otero family's home while his wife Paula was sleeping, and he killed everyone inside. Josie, age 11, and Joseph, age 9, had to watch helplessly while he killed their parents by strangled. Josie shouted, "Mommy, I love you," as she saw Rader. He killed her mother by strangling. After that, Rader brought the young girl down the basement, where he undressed her and hung her from a sewer pipe. In her last words, she questioned as to her future. "Well, honey, you're going to be in heaven tonight with the rest of your family," her killer said to her in a serious and calm tone. He masturbated while he watched the girl choke to death. As a memory of his first crime, he collected part of the little girl's underpants and snapped pictures of the dead victims. Dennis Rader then returned home to his spouse. He was the president of the church council, so he had to get ready for church. Dennis Rader's family life alongside Paula Dietz while committing his murders. Paula Dietz, the wife of Dennis Rader, was getting ready to have her own family as her husband was murdering another. Only a few months after the 15-year-old son of the Oteros discovered about his family, Rader abducted his next of victims. Before stabbing and strangling a young college girl named Catherine Bright, the BTK killer followed and waited out at her apartment. Unaware of her husband's actions, Paula got pregnant with Rader's first child at the age of 3 months. Dennis Rader called the local newspaper, the Wichita Eagle, and told them where they could find his confession after he wrote a letter to them hidden within an engineering book at the Wichita Public Library describing how he killed the Oteros. He said he planned to kill again and went by the name BTK, which stood for bind, torture, and kill, his favorite technique. Paula Dietz told Dennis Rader she was expecting a child, and he allegedly decided to take a break from killing people. "I was so excited. For us and our folks," said Dennis Rader. "Our family had grown. I got busy with my career and my baby. But this was only temporary, as in 1977, the BTK killer attacked once more." However, Dietz discovered an early copy of a poem named Shirley Locks, in which her husband writes, "You shall not scream," thus before her husband killed Shirley Vian, his 7th victim, while her 6-year-old son watched through a door's keyhole. "Just take a seat on a cushion and consider death and me." However, Paula Dietz remained silent, even as the clues added up. When her husband summarized newspaper articles about the serial killer with what he claimed to be his own secret code, she remained silent. She didn't say anything more than a mild attack. "You spell us like BTK," when she saw that. The BTK killer's mocking letters to the police contained many of the same terrible misspellings as the letters she received from her husband. She didn't inquire about the mysterious locked box he kept in their house anyway. She made no attempt at all to look inside. Had she did this, Rader would have called it the mother lode, a treasure trove of horrors. It included keepsakes from the crime scenes, such as driver's licenses and the underwear of dead women, as well as photos showing the BTK killer dressed like his victims, choking and burying himself alive, acting out the ways in which he had killed them. In an interview, Rader said, "Part of my MO was to find and keep the victim's underwear. I would then either begin a new fantasy or relive the day in my fantasy." In an interview, Rader said, "Part of my MO was to find and keep the victim's underwear. I would then either begin a new fantasy or relive the day in my fantasy." However, Dennis Rader was a good man, a great father. As his wife would later explain to the police, he would never cause harm to anyone. The BTK killer, a proud father secretly living a double life. Even Dennis Rader's own kids were unaware of his suspicions. At his worst, their father was a religious Christian, Carrie Rawson. His daughter described how her mother and she had to pull her father off of her brother after he aggressively grabbed him by the neck in order to save his life. According to Carrie, "I can still picture it clearly, and I can see the intense anger in my dad's face and eyes." However, this seems to be an isolated incident. When she learned of the BTK killer, it was her own father, strangely, who relaxed her late-night worries. Every morning as he went to church, her father gave a wave to Maureen Hedge, who is 53 years old. It was Dennis Rader who talked to and stated his family after she became the 8th victim of the BTK killer, strangled and tied to death. "Remain calm," he told them, "we're secure." Actually, the previous evening, while Rader was watching his son at his Cub Scout retreat, he had killed the woman by slipping out of the residence. With no worries, he returned the next morning to the group of young guys. Vicky Wegerle, 28, became his 9th victim in 1986, and her 2-year-old son watched from a playpen as she was killed. The fact that is, until the BTK killer accidentally brought himself to justice, her murder would remain unsolved. Dennis Rader faces justice after 3 decades. In a way, Dennis Rader settled into a home life and started working as a compliance supervisor for the Park City suburb of Wichita in 1991. He had a reputation for being a strict officer who was frequently harsh with his customers. That same year, he committed his 10th and final crime. Rader broke through the sliding glass door of Dolores Davis, a 62-year-old grandmother who lived a short distance away from his own family, using a cinder block. Her body was thrown away near a bridge. Dennis Rader discovered a story, recalling the 30th anniversary of the Otero killings, in the local newspaper during his last year of freedom. In an attempt to bring back awareness of the BTK killer, he sent and delivered around a dozen threatening letters and packages to law enforcement and the media in 2004. Some included mementos from his killings, some showed dolls gagged and bound like his victims, and one even had an overview for the BTK story, an autobiographical book he planned to publish. A letter on a floppy disk, however, was the one that would ultimately prove destructive for him. The cops discovered the deleted Microsoft Word documents metadata inside. Dennis Rader, the president of the church council, wrote a document for the Christ Lutheran Church. DNA samples were taken from one of his victim's fingernails, and authorities examined his daughter's pap smears to confirm a match. On February 25, 2005, Rader was taken from his house in front of his family when they discovered a positive match. The father attempted to maintain a comforting expression. He promised his daughter that everything would be resolved shortly as he gave her one more hug. But he made no effort to hide anything while in the police vehicle. Upon being questioned if he recognized why he was being held, Rader said with a sly smile, "Oh, I have suspicions why." He seemed to take a sick pleasure in telling the judge all the grisly details of the women's deaths, as he admitted to all 10 murders. The BTK killer received a sentence of 175 years in prison without the chance of release. The only reason he avoided execution was because Kansas did not have an execution law in place during the 17 years of his rampage. When he was given 10 consecutive life sentences, he was 60 years old. When the BTK killer was caught, a fractured family was left behind. Dennis Rader's wife left her meal half-eaten on the dinner table when her husband was arrested. Paula Dietz would never come back to finish it. She refused to set foot in that house ever again when the terrible truth about what Dennis Rader had done was revealed. After Rader's confession of guilt, she filed for divorce. During the trial, the Rader family made an effort to remain silent. Other than Dennis Rader's theory that, "I actually think I may be possessed with demons," there was no explanation for his rampage. Paula Dietz was accused by the media of hiding information from them, protecting her husband, and denying the proof. At first, the BTK killer's daughter hated him, especially after he wrote a letter to the newspaper claiming that she reminds me of me. The children were aware that they originated from their father and that he might still be alive in them. They also realized that they would not have been born if their father had not been stopped at the time of his first murder. Carrie replied, "That really messes with your head. There's almost a sense of regret about being alive. They passed away. You also need to survive." The hardest part of this was that Dennis Rader was still their father, despite everything he had done. "Do I tell you that you were the light of my life and that I grew up idolizing you?" Carrie writes in her autobiography, "A serial killer's daughter. I just wished you were sitting next to me in the theater, sharing a tub of buttered popcorn, but you're not. You won't ever have this again." She wrote her father. Was it worth it? The ongoing aftermath of Dennis Rader's horrific crimes. The BTK killer's story is still being repeated, almost 20 years after his arrest. The Osage County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma declared in August 2023 that Dennis Rader was the subject of an investigation into the possible disappearance of Cynthia Kinney, a 16-year-old cheerleader. in June 1976. Her last known location was a Pawhuska laundromat, which is directly across the street from a bank, where Rader might have been working on a security system installation at the time. The most terrifying passage comes from one of Rader's papers from that period, which just says, "Bad laundry day." Sheriffs also believe Rader was the sender of a 2,004-word puzzle that mocked the authorities over the kidney case and was delivered to a TV station in Kansas City. Rader is also the main suspect in the 1990 McDonald County, Missouri, death of a 22-year-old woman named Shauna Beth Garber, according to Osage sheriffs, who made this news immediately. Her remains weren't recognized until 2021, despite the fact that she had been bound, raped, and killed in the same manner as other BTK killer victims. In addition to any unidentified victims of Dennis Rader that may still be out there, he made headlines in 2024 when his daughter Carrie Rawson came out with claims that a different journal entry he had written supports his sexual assault of her in 1981. When she was too young to recall, she saw a notebook entry that said, "Carrie, BND, Game 1981, where BND stood for bondage." Rawson looked over the entry and was shocked. She said, "My stomach twisted into white-hot lightning. Final evidence that you, my father, assaulted me sexually as toddler was there, 40 years later." It's obvious that the BTK killer's crimes are continuously being discovered. But for the families of his victims, the scars of his actions will never fully heal. Dennis Rader's story serves as a grim reminder that evil can hide behind the most unassuming masks. Viewers, this was the grisly story of Dennis Rader, the man no one suspected was the BTK killer. What you can say about this case, please tell me in the comment box. Thank you for watching. If you're fascinated by true crime and the hidden stories behind some of history's most notorious criminals, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell for more chilling stories. Take care of yourself, and I meet you in a new interesting video.